Don't you find Sunday sometimes quite an exhausting day? I think in my case it's more exhausting because I have quite a lot of teaching on a Sunday, and and everyone around me seems to think it's a day for relaxing, except of course for Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting aimed yesterday to be and put out lots of publicity saying that he was going to attack Nigel Farage, but instead there were chair climbing protesters at the Fabian Society conference who took the wind out of his sails. This Wes Streeting, this health secretary extraordinaire, locking horns with Nigel Farage in another room, of course, the perennial rabble-rouser, and being briefly overshadowed by a pair of climate protesters with a knack for dramatic timing. They're almost like having aerialists in the room trying the triple or the quadruple somersault. In his address, Streeting branded Farage's vision as miserablist and declinist. It's rather like the soothsayer in Something Rotten, who's doing it's a musical, and sometimes they will there'll be no talking at all, and they sing things and they hold one note for a very long time and then they change the note so that you notice. The fellow Bottom says that sounds very miserable. I think they call it miserable. And so miserablist and declinist, and quite the vocabulary choice. One imagines him thumbing through a thesaurus before settling on words that scream, "I went to a good school." His criticism, Farage, he claims, lacks faith in a universal, free at the point of use NHS. Advocating instead for an insurance-based system like France's. Well, the problem is that the insurance-based system that we've got in the UK is as crippled as the NHS itself. The problem is you would have to start again. The insurance system doesn't work. Because if you take out expensive health insurance and you go along with a problem, the insurance people will say, "Oh, it's too complicated. You have to go into an NHS hospital." The insurance people pick and mix what they want, and then put up the premium anyway. And if you've had to deal with insurance on any level, you will know that basically it's an institution, it's an organisation which is riddled with corruption, and riddled with contempt for the consumer. I had to ring up the other day. I had to ring up Aviva to find out why they'd paid me £50 as opposed to £320, and the £50 turned out to be compensation for my complaint. But they still haven't paid me the £320. It's now nearly a month late. They've paid the complaint, which was to do with their cutting off the telephone conversation and the hours of trying to extract the payment which is due. And it's like pulling teeth. It's such an unpleasant experience. So if you think the NHS is bad, think of an insurance-based system. Worse, certainly the insurance-based system that we've got in the UK, which forms the basis of the private system here, which is highly dependent on the NHS anyway. Streeting countered with Labour's ambitious promise to cut waiting lists and make the NHS a fortress against the populist tide. What we actually need in Britain is something not unlike the Turkish model, where you've got a private system and a public system. You use whichever one is available, and the payments are dealt with later. But any hospital, whether private or public, must deal with emergencies and must deal with the problems. And then when you're out of that emergency thing, then you can elect where you go. And Farage, of course, fired back with gusto, accusing Labour of spreading mistruths and claiming Reform UK represents the optimistic alternative. For a man often seen railing against the establishment, Farage has a remarkable knack for drawing attention by rehashing old debates in new costumes. It's like it's like the Abanazar character in Aladdin. New lamps for old. But the real drama came not from the Farage streeting clash, but from the climate protesters. They stole the thunder. As streeting outlined Labour's NHS vision, Ellie and co. stole the spotlight with cries about Labour's subsidies to the Drax power station, a story of burning wood, questionable green credentials, and apparently poor optics. Security may have whisked them away, but they ensured that climate change nudged its way into an already crowded agendum. Streeting, ever the politician, laughed it off, quipping about the low turnout of hecklers. It was a reminder that no conference speech is safe from the double-edged sword of activism. One moment you're dissecting Farage's healthcare stance, the next you're accused of subsidising deforestation. The broader theme of Streeting's speech was clear. The NHS is the battleground where Labour will confront not just Conservative neglect, but Farage's populist momentum. And yet, as the protesters highlight, the battle against cynicism cannot be fought in isolation. Climate, healthcare, inequality, they're all interconnected, feeding the discontent on which figures like Farage thrive. Farage like the little disease creeping up the leg. As Streeting closed with his hymn of hope, change has only just begun, it was difficult not to wonder, is this optimism enough? Or will Labour's balancing act between progressive ideals and political pragmatism leave it vulnerable to a populist counterpunch? Time will tell, but one thing is clear. The battle for Britain's future is as much about ideas as it is about theatrics, and Streeting, Farage, and even Ellie have all played their part in that spectacle. As for Streeting, Farage, and Ellie, who is the one we're likely to remember? Who is the one who is who is poised to be significant? I think it's Streeting, by the way. I think it's Streeting. And I think the climate change people were quite right to target him. He is the man of tomorrow, not Farage. He's the man of yesterday. He's the man of the failed Brexit. Streeting is the person to watch.